Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's AEDC Voice, the monthly webinar. Our team at Alaska Executive Search and Bradison Management Group feel really lucky to be a part of this, and we're really proud to see AEDC kind of being an industry leader in our community and sharing this information and connecting people. So thank you and enjoy the webinar. Pass it off to you, Phil.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of the AEDC Voice. I want to immediately thank Alaska Executive Search and Bradison Management Group for their generous sponsorship that makes this monthly event possible. We've had some great speakers in the past, and today is no different. Today's webinar topic is Business Leaders Prioritize Community and Solutions to End Homelessness. The Anchorage Homelessness Leadership Council is a group of 11 Alaska business leaders representing some of the largest companies in the city, providing their expertise, resources, and time to advance solutions to eliminate homelessness. HLC members featured on this month's AEDC Voice are Carol Gore, President and CEO of Cook Inlet Housing Authority, Paul Landis, Senior Vice President of GCI, and Greg Cerbana, Vice President at Weidner Apartment Homes. Just a little bit about our speakers today. With Carol Gore's leadership, Cook Inlet Housing Authority has a strategic approach to develop quality, affordable housing and affordable housing programs throughout Alaska's Southcentral region. The strategic plan embodies the values of partnering, shared services, and leveraging every available affordable housing dollar to ensure the long-term fiscal health of the organization and continue to benefit Alaskans most in need. Paul Landis and his team at GCI have a reputation of creating innovative campaigns that have resulted in accelerated long-term growth for Alaska's largest telecommunications company. Notable milestones include overseeing the development of all 38 storefronts in the state, launching the GCI 1 gig red service in Alaska, and increasing the number of household cable modems from 1,000 to 125,000 over the course of his tenure. Greg Cerbana leads the strategic development, implementation, and management of Weidner Apartment Homes' internal and external communication strategies. In February of this year, Weidner announced a collaborative and measured approach to reduce homelessness in Alaska with the purchase of Anchorage land for development of a daytime resource hub on Anchorage's 3rd Avenue that will improve access to essential mental health, substance abuse services, and employment services. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel, and I'll turn it over to them.
Okay, Bill, I think I start. I'm Paul Landis. I'm on the senior executive team at GCI, and I've worked with many of you over my 22 years here at GCI, the state's largest telecom company. You know, I'm here today because homelessness in Anchorage is a passionate issue for me. And I can tell you it's a priority issue for the nearly 2,000 employees at GCI. We do not have to accept that experiencing homelessness will always be a thing. And the sooner that we as a community address it, the sooner we will improve the quality of life for everyone in this community that we call home. Carol?
Good morning, everyone. I'll probably say a few more words than Paul, just because that's kind of what I do. I'm very familiar with AEDC and your work in the community, bringing business leaders together to help us make Anchorage a great place to live, work, and play. I've had the privilege of serving on the advisory council for AEDC and also serving as a co-chair for AEDC's Live, Work, Play housing group. Through that group, we've worked with AEDC to bring together some new housing options like accessory dwelling units and unit lot subdivision ordinances. I'm also excited to be part of the Business Leadership Council that, if I slip and use the acronym HLC, that's the Anchorage Homelessness Leadership Council. Saying the whole phrase is a bit of a mouthful, so HLC, I'm proud to be part of that because it brings the private sector to a community problem where they can take a business approach to a very complex issue. And I think we've learned nothing else together in the last couple of years that we've been together it is very, very complex, and it's not there is no silver bullet, but I think we have a different approach to really understanding homelessness as a community issue. And hopefully we're going to be able to bring some leadership to support the providers that are doing the good work here. What we've lacked in our community is coordination, collaboration, and adequate sustainable funding that is aligned to maintain outcomes. The current system does not invite collaboration, and the resources are unstable. I think we have amazing providers, but we can't expect our shelters and nonprofit providers to fix a problem that comes from job loss, death in a family, divorce, mental or physical disabilities, trauma, and other economic and social factors. Homelessness is something that has touched many, many of us. It's a community issue. And the HLC is engaged in the hard work of elevating the conversation to an action plan. We've learned a lot and think we can make a difference by working together to identify, advocate, and support sustainable investments and solutions. We know it will take sustainable funding and intentional investment in services, shelter, and the right housing options to make a difference. It will take all of us to solve this challenge that's way beyond the optics that we're also concerned about. If we want solutions, we need to get upstream and invest in prevention and strategic approaches to address the root causes. As a housing provider, we know firsthand how difficult it is to move someone from a shelter environment directly into permanent housing, unless they have the support to help them in that transition. People need that continued supported services to help them stabilize after being homeless, some of them for years. For some, that can take just a few weeks. For some, it takes a year. And for some, they may have permanent disabling factors where they need a different type of housing. Most of all, what we really need is a community that works together. Our providers, the municipality, funders, landlords in our community, each providing what we do best to bring the right housing options and support to those in need. And I want to give you an example, something that that Cook Inlet Housing is engaged in. You will see very, very soon. We'll soon break ground on 28 micro units in partnership with Covenant House, adjacent to their youth engagement center, where the youth that have been experiencing homelessness can live right next door independently, but still have access to services. This has been at least 5 years in the making, and we're really, really pleased to put something new on the ground where we've seen some gaps. I appreciate being part of this conversation and look forward to the good questions. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner and dear friend, Greg Cerbana.
Hi friends, Greg Cerbana here, and I think we're doing the intro part here, and then I'm going to throw it back to Paul for some comments, and then we'll each have a section. But it is very difficult after meeting and working with and volunteering and getting to know the kind of people that are on the dais this evening. It's hard to follow them, particularly Carol and Paul, and so I'm going to do my best. But as a brief way of introduction, my name is Greg Cerbana, as you can see, and I do work for Weidner Apartment Homes. Many of you might know that we are a property management company that owns and operates apartment communities as our primary business. We operate throughout the lower 48 as well as in Alaska. We've been in Alaska for over 4 decades at this point, and Mr. Weidner calls his experience in Alaska both with Alaska Air as its very first vice president of marketing, but also in the tourism industry prior to beginning some landlord activities as some of the best years of his life. And so that's why we've continued to invest in the community. We own and operate about 5,000 apartments in Alaska in particular, and about just shy of 60,000 throughout the United States and Canada. And many of you might ask yourself, well, what is a guy like that doing on this conversation, this homelessness conversation? You are anything but as a company. And I will grant you that. But out of abundance of not caution by any means, but certainly out an abundance of understanding the need out there. Mr. Weidner charted our company on a course about 8 years ago to find out more about what's happening in these communities that we live, work, and play in. And homelessness is clearly an issue that has been exacerbated throughout the years in many different metropolitan areas, whether it's large or small. And Anchorage is not immune to that. But what is different about Anchorage, at least in our perspective, is that there is an opportunity to try different solutions to finding real answers and putting time, effort, money, partnerships behind opportunities for us to really make a dent and end homelessness as we know it. And so that's why we've invested time, effort, and money and expertise into this conversation. And we welcome the opportunity to work with other business leaders, folks that are in the philanthropy world, folks that are elected officials, and others who just care about the issue to find an answer to this. And so we look forward to participating not only in this panel, but clearly in the conversation in Anchorage. And I hope that our report here later on today about what we're doing in partnership with others will be inspiring for folks. And that's our goal. So, Paul, I'm going to turn it back over to you for your comments.
Thanks, Greg. And I'd like to thank you, Bill, for inviting the Homeless Leadership Council to speak with the AEDC membership today. And, you know, for those of you watching, I would also like to thank you, and I appreciate your interest in not only what it will take to solve homelessness, but what is the important role of our business community on, I would call this a very priority issue. One of the key things is engagement. Engagement is a key to making a difference. And I'm going to start us off with a few more of the things, how the business community is showing that engagement and who the leadership, Homeless Leadership Council is. As you all know, homelessness is an incredibly complex community problem, and the solutions are really just as intricate. As members of the business community, we bring competitive, innovative, results-driven, cost-effective processes and accountability to any issue, and that's our role to improve and support the public process of ending homelessness. The Homelessness Leadership Council is a group of 11 Alaska business leaders representing some of the largest companies in this city. The health of our community is incredibly important to each of us, and we created this council to lend a hand and lend an ear and to help provide our expertise, resources, and time to advance solutions to help eliminate homelessness. When you look at our council, we're represented by professionals from the oil and gas industries, technology, housing, Alaska Native regional corporations, faith-based and nonprofit sectors. We meet regularly to review data provided by the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, and we look at the progress of city efforts. We share research, and we also importantly share success stories from similar communities. We try to make sure that our community's commitment to improve the lives of Alaskans experiencing homelessness just doesn't fade. This can't be a little initiative. This has really got to be a long-term focus for all of us. It's interesting that as we've done polling, more than 60% of Anchorage believes that there is a solution to homelessness in our city. So we've got the majority on our side. Today, we're looking at a problem that has been exacerbated by outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic. People need our help right now. And we need to address the issue head on to get people out of the cycle of homelessness, and more importantly, to prevent people from falling into that cycle in the first place. We know that ending homelessness does not mean just providing shelter. To end the cycle, we have to provide the services to support our community members so that they don't just survive, but I would say thrive. Nearly 90% of our community agrees that we should make services like mental health, substance treatment, and job training available as well. That our surveys have indicated that 90% agreeing that the city should make important services available to residents experiencing homelessness. It says it's a top priority. It's clear Anchorage wants to do what is right and understands that solving homelessness benefits everyone. We're committed to providing transparent, measurable updates on Anchorage's progress when it comes to ending homelessness. We know that the data has been missing, and we're going to try and make sure that there's continuous improvement by holding ourselves and our city leaders accountable for that progress. We've always had strong providers in our city, but we were missing the connective fiber, the general contractor to make sure projects are staying on track and working cohesively. And that's a role that we believe that the Homelessness Leadership Council and the business community can fill. We're here to track the issues and ask the hard questions, such as when the Sullivan Arena is decommissioned as a shelter this fall, do these residents have a place to go? Nearly 60% of Anchorage residents support the city purchasing properties to house and care for individuals experiencing homelessness. And that majority support may surprise many of you. It surprised me because that's not what we were hearing at the assembly or on the news, but the questions and resistance has been more about the process. And we believe that lessons have been learned and Anchorage is positioned to make a difference. In closing, I'll ask that my friend Carol Gore share her insights from her decades of working with vulnerable populations and standing up supportive housing that has worked in our community. Thank you, and over to you, Carol.
Great, Paul. So I want to respond to your question this way by saying I hear over and over again, we just need to put them in permanent housing. Just put them in an apartment. There's your solution. Let's get them out of the shelter and into an apartment. And I will tell you, as an affordable housing provider, I'd love to have every one of the people that we see on a street safely housed in an appropriate housing environment. How Inlet Housing got involved in the homelessness discussion was because we were housing people that were moving directly out of shelters into our housing, and they weren't successful. That's not the outcome a landlord wants. It's not the outcome you want for that individual or that household, because every time they're not successful, it makes it even harder to get them back into housing again. So we have to think about the entire spectrum of what happens when you're homeless. Because they weren't successful, we were asking ourselves questions about why weren't they successful. I said, well, if we don't have the right knowledge in our bucket, we're a landlord. We're not a homeless provider. So we started just showing up to the coalition meetings. And I will tell you, initially the providers were like, what are you doing here? why are you in my pond? You know, and to me, that's just a validation of how siloed we are in our community, that we weren't welcomed as part of the solution, because we certainly saw them as part of the solution. Honestly, we had to learn their language so that we could understand each other, and they could understand that our motives were not to take a piece of their critical funding, but to make sure that people didn't boomerang from our housing back into a shelter environment. That wasn't the right outcome for that individual, wasn't the right outcome for Inlet Housing, and it certainly wasn't the right outcome for the provider. So we began to sort of knit together solutions. And I will say what we realize is mostly people fail because of behavior, not because of financial reasons. That's that's because we expect them to move from basically a dormitory situation where there are no walls into an apartment with walls of their own. One of the first times that we helped to move someone in, we realized what we didn't know. They move in with no coffee cup, no water glass, no shower curtain, no towel, no soap. They have a washer and dryer, but no laundry detergent. So when you think about the gaps in the service delivery, we fixed that gap now. They get a welcoming package that's not just flowers on the table, but it really gives them their basic needs. These are the kinds of, those little gaps make a difference to the success that people can have where they're in, when they're in the right housing option. I will just say maybe a couple more things. I'm a forever Alaskan and Anchorage is my hometown. When I was growing up, homelessness was invisible because guess what? Every one of my mom's relatives that experienced some financial challenge, personal trauma, showed up to live in our 10 by 55 trailer. I can't tell you the number of nights that I had 4 kids in my little twin bed. And we just took care of each other. But that's not the solution. Anchorage is now a city that should have the competence to have better solutions that are more sustainable, that bring those solutions to those families so that they can very quickly get back on their feet and back to independence. I want to say one more thing, which is about the providers. I've learned a lot about our providers, and we have high expectations of them. We study models, we read what other cities are doing, and we think, why can't we do that? Why can't we just change how we're doing business and do this one thing? It takes money to do that. And what's happening today is the money we have, our providers are just scrapping to put together the right money to stay alive, to take care of people. They are competing for the scarce resources that we have. We have to, it's just no different than a business. You have to stabilize them so they can begin to adjust their models and adapt them for local solutions. But we need to help them by giving them the right resources. They know the answers. They are adapting on the fly. They're doing really great work, but we don't give them the space to share that. I want to make sure what I say in this room is I've learned a lot from them. And we've adapted our housing model so that it is a better fit. But that's that collaboration and working together. Maybe the last thing I would say is I talked initially about each of us doing what we do best. And I want to give you an example. Most people don't know that Cook Inlet Housing owns the Brother Francis Shelter building. We know how to build buildings. We know how to take care of that physical plant. We don't know diddly squat about how to run a homeless program. So we partnered with Catholic Social Services and they act as an owner. And eventually they will have that building to themselves. But we've been very, very good partners by doing what we do best, bringing what we do best, and working together. We basically stay out of the way and let them do what they do best. But they know that they have us behind them, making sure that their physical house is in good repair and it meets the expectations of their programs. So I'll close with that and turn it over to you, Greg, to take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you. Again, very tough to follow my friend Carol. But I do want to shine light on one thing that she said and build upon that. And many of you know that we are a private owner and we're a private market rate provider of housing. So much like our friends at Cook Inlet Housing, we're a housing provider as well. But we work in the private market instead of in the subsidized capital A affordable world in which Carol and her team are so very successful at. But one of the things that appealed to us about participating with the Homeless Leadership Council really was the opportunity to bring some of that private expertise to a problem that's going to need multiple voices to fix. And so early on in our conversation, we tried to figure out, well, how can we leverage that experience? What's the best way for us to use some of that private market experience and try out some of these things that have been tested in other markets? Because as Carol said, as housing providers, we do that very well. We know, how to build a building. We know how to maintain that building. We've gotten some degree of expertise in managing that building and making sure that the decisions we make today will allow us to be successful tomorrow. So therefore, we won't run out of money when the roof needs to be repaired or when we need to replace appliances and those sorts of things. Those are really operational, capital intensive questions that you become successful at. But as Carol said, it's more than just a housing first. And I know that that is a concept that our providers have educated us on. Those who are in that business have indicated that housing, putting a roof over people's head, is really the primary issue, or at least the first issue that you have to tackle. And I agree with that. But I think it's just as important to provide those who are coming out of homelessness an ability to be successful and stay out of homelessness. So it's one of those things to put a roof over somebody's head. It's another thing altogether to teach them, to train them and support them on how to best stay housed. And so we came together with Cook Inlet Housing Authority years ago and decided on a concept that we executed, and we called it Path to Independence. That was a program that was going to bring homes, apartments to those who are experiencing homelessness. But the most important aspect there was really trying to identify those folks who just needed a little bit of a hand up. It was maybe not those folks at the highest level of acuity, the highest level of a need, those who are needing intensive amounts of whether it's counseling or addiction services or mental health services, but those folks who are needing just a little bit of assistance, that they're on the margins and they could use a little bit of financial assistance in order to stay housed and to stay with a job. And so we partnered with Cook Inlet Housing, and the missing sauce, if you will, the secret sauce, was really that wraparound social service component that we learned is significantly missing in a lot of other programs like this. And so bringing that aspect of case management to the folks who are living in these units, I think was really something that we wanted to. And we had broad support from the business community. We were able to raise quite a significant amount of money in order for us to pilot this program over the course of the last 3 years. And we've learned a lot. We've made some adjustments down the way. The pandemic has changed the way and the motivation and the challenges that we face, but we're committed to that program. That is one of a number of different programs that those of us who have started to put money and effort and time into this conversation have learned about. And I'll tell you, as Carol said before, we're not experts on this at all. And we look at some of the folks, and I look at the attendees that are on this call right now, and folks that have given us information and feedback, folks that have provided us with their expertise and really shared with us some of the things that they've tried that have worked, some of the things that haven't worked, more importantly, for us to be able to include in our pilot. And I'm very grateful for that. So, that is one of the many different things that we've brought to this conversation that is a new approach, a private approach, if you will. I want to shift gears a little bit, not talk so much about Path to Independence, but as many of you know, about 1.5 years ago, there were 4 different funders that came together in an announcement and indicated that they were putting money into a $40 million pot. And that was for us to try innovative new approaches towards dealing with the challenges brought up by homelessness. Each one of those funders that included Primera, Providence, Rasmussen, and Weidner was free to utilize the monies that they'd put in there in any way that they wanted to. But coordinating those conversations seemed to be one way that we could break down those silos. And as we looked over the course of the last year and a half, many different ideas have been floated, and more importantly, many different ideas have been funded. But I wanted to talk to you briefly today about what we have worked on, Weidner has. And as part of our work learning about homelessness, we've done a number of different tours throughout the United States. We've looked at different approaches. We've went and experienced what other cities are doing. And one in particular stands out that I wanted to share with you, which was our experience in Houston, Texas. A number of folks from Anchorage went down there about 2 years ago. Part of the reason we were so encouraged by that trip, but one of the reasons we wanted to make that trip is because we were made aware that the work that had been done in Houston had achieved essentially functional zero in veterans homelessness. So we wanted to learn a little bit about what they were doing down there. And it was a packed agenda for almost 2.5 days. But we got a lot in, and we saw a lot, and we asked a lot of questions. They were very generous with their time, the folks down there. But I'll tell you, after looking at that trip and comparing my notes and talking through what I saw and shared within my team, I think one of the things that was the most impressive to us was this idea of a daytime engagement center or a resource hub. And as we talked about it a little bit more with Mr. Weidner, and he talked with the folks over at Rasmussen, and particularly Ed Rasmussen, they both believed that that was something that was missing in our community at the time, the community of Anchorage. And so, going out and seeing how other folks deal with these challenges, going out and seeing how other folks meet and are having some degree of success, gave us the opportunity to try and see, hey, is that something we could bring to Anchorage? And that's what we worked on doing. For the last 18 months or so, we've been working diligently as a partnership. So Rasmussen and Weidner came together and talked a little bit more about how we could work on this problem and bring this solution to this market. And in the midst of all this, and I won't rehash the challenges that were laid bare at the assembly last year when the announcement was made that they were going to purchase some of these buildings. But buildings fundamentally are important for us to bring service, whether they're shelter or rehab or day engagement / resource centers. And so as the city was going through that conversation and that dialogue, we were having that same one internally about how we can help, how we can take care of this problem and model what we saw at other places. So we announced, after looking at several different options, both throughout the city, we came to the agreement, the partnership of Rasmussen and Weidner, that perhaps some of our monies could be best leveraged in bringing a daytime engagement center to an area that had already had lots of investment before, but had some success and some challenges. I think the area down on 3rd Avenue that houses Beans and Brother Francis Shelter has seen its fair share of success, but it's also been plagued by challenges. Some of those are things that we hope to fix in our announcement that we made. Fundamentally, we announced a real estate deal, and the goal is for people to spend less time experiencing homelessness. So the resource hub that we proposed was a place for people to connect with services, for them to address their basic needs and kind of receive the help they need to quickly transition out of shelter. It's really the hub for the city's most immediate homeless services. That's what we envision, and it'd be connected by a number of spokes to a larger system of resource centers and shelters that are more dispersed throughout the city than concentrated in one area. Some people ask us why we chose Anchorage, and as I said earlier, we decided to invest in this solution in Anchorage because it is a place that Dean Weidner believed where we can move the needle. In a city of this size, In a state that's disconnected, homelessness is a solvable issue. But fundamentally, we don't see it only as as a housing issue. As we said earlier, and as many of the people who responded to our surveys and those on the street, this is not just a housing issue. Because for a community as capable and resourceful as Anchorage is, finding or financing or renovating housing units is frankly a manageable challenge. But the real barrier to solving the city's homeless issues is a critical shortage of mental health care and substance abuse services in Alaska, and also bringing those services closer to the shelter where people are trying to get out of homelessness. So that's how we proposed developing our resource center, a place where people can get service, a place where they can meet with providers, and to bring those essential services directly to the site to get people quickly off the streets and help them move along. I'm going to tell you just a brief, and I don't have that much time. I'm looking already. I can talk forever. Let me tell you a brief story though. And today, right now, as a matter of fact, I live just out south of Seattle, and my wife is on the other side of the state, 4 hours away, because she's getting a passport. And when we looked, because we're supposed to be traveling out of country in July, and she just realized that she cannot find her passport. And so she is on the other side of the state because there are no appointments for her to try and get a passport for the next 7 weeks. Well, we're supposed to be in Mexico in 8 weeks. So she was able to drive over there. But I pose this question to you. If you're homeless and you need to get an ID, and you are only walking or you're only taking a bus, can you really go 3 hours to the other side of the state in order to make an appointment? I'm going to suggest to you that you can't. And so the concept of bringing resources close to where people are staying and putting their head down at nighttime seems so elemental. But one of the things that we saw in Houston was that this was primary reason why they were going to be successful, is because they were able to do the things that we take for granted, whether that's taking a shower or combing your hair or washing your clothes or getting your mail or getting an email account set up so you could try and get a job, getting a license. That was something that was important. Meeting with a substance abuse counselor, having a meal, getting out of the weather. Those are the things that we take for granted so often. And when there's such a public outcry at the visible nature of homelessness, if we're not doing something to help those who are experiencing that to get out of that, then we've failed them. And so I'm going to wrap up my comments. I probably could talk for all day. I'm sure that Paul and Carol could, about the things that we've learned. But fundamentally speaking, we're trying to put some effort and some money and some new partnerships together, along with Cook Inlet Housing and our friends over at Rasmussen Foundation, in order to find a solution down there at the 3rd Avenue. And so our real estate deal is alive. We're working on closing this. I guess I didn't speak about this. We are buying the Beans Cafe building, and that's going to be our resource hub. Beans will still exist, but like many businesses through the pandemic and prior to, they're shifting their focus into a more of a distributed food provider. So they will be expanding their business lines as they've experienced throughout the pandemic. The need for food and to deal with food insecurity in many different populations is so prevalent and important in Anchorage. And so they're going to be able to expand their reach by delivering food to different places throughout Anchorage. And we're proud to partner with them. They've been wonderful to work with, and we hope to be able to close that acquisition, as well as some other land around the area, in order to help give a little bit more elbow room and space for what we envision to be a campus that can meet the needs of our homeless brothers and sisters. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my comments and throw it back to Paul and Bill to see if we have any questions.
Well, thank you all. This has been a really great set of observations and updates and perspectives. And I know that our audience is deeply appreciative of everything that you've shared so far. So for the audience, if you have a question, you can post it in the chat, and we'll be getting to those in just a moment. So just please use the chat feature, and you'll be able to pose a question But we've got a couple of questions that we wanted to ask at the beginning. So just, and I'll leave this up to the three of you as to who might want to answer this. You can all answer it if you'd like. How does homelessness impact the economy and the return to downtown, reopening of downtown? Two questions in one. So Paul, Greg, Carol, anybody in particular want to take that one on, or?
You want me to start, Paul? I'm happy to start.
Sounds good.
So I think of people as a resource. What does our city need to be successful? We need more capacity. You drive through downtown or any part of Anchorage, help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. We have human resources that are not engaged in that capacity. And I firmly believe that's part of the solution for downtown. And if we think of people as that asset and a resource for our community, I think that could change our perspective and how we invest in them. Especially we have an opportunity with the engagement center that Rasmussen Foundation and Weidner Apartment Homes is engaging in close to Brother Francis. So I would just say that as an opener.
And I might add,
Gentlemen,
Bill,
anything to, go ahead, Paul.
yeah, let me add from a business perspective, one of the things that we hear often is the visible homeless. And one of the big solutions that keeps kind of cropping up is let's do much more camp abatement. The problem with that is you have to have put an infrastructure in place and places for those folks to go. If all you do is camp abatement, you just perpetuate the problem and move it from place to place. And as we've talked today, finding the solution for housing first, and then tackling things like camp abatement and the visible homelessness is really sort of paramount to its success. We've got to invest in places for the homeless to be able to position themselves before we go solve the other problem. And that's a tough one. And that's the stuff that the community sees as so very visible. But we've all got to work together around creating the infrastructure and the places for the homeless to go before we go tackle the problem of removing the camps and the abatement initiative.
Excuse me. Another question that I think is a really important one, and forgive me, Greg, I wanted to make sure if you wanted to add to the, okay, good. So here's a question that I think kind of drills down to any number of business owners and business leaders' perspectives. How do you be compassionate? What can you do as a business owner when your employees don't feel like they're safe?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that if I can. I mean, as you know, we operate apartment communities and we have employees and we have residents who live there that we care deeply about and want to make sure that the living experience that they have on a daily and monthly basis is something that they feel there's value in. And so when we have homeless folks who are either in our hallways or are on the properties, it prevents there's a challenge, right? Because and I'm just speaking plainly that our residents expect to be able to have some degree of safety, some degree of comfort for the money that they exchange for rent. And I understand that, right? But there's a level of, you use the word compassion there, that we have to understand that there are people out there not being able to meet their basic needs. And so by doing what we can do to advance this conversation in the way that we're doing, we're hoping that other business leaders can join us in that effort. And they may not be able to bring a resource center there, but they can join the conversation. They can figure out different ways for us to provide food or housing or dialogue or perspective to the conversation. And so, those are probably more broad answers than you're looking for, but each of us in our own way have to contribute what our experience and our expertise is. And doing that, I think you allow the conversation to be broader and not so narrow. There are more voices that are added, but by wishing it away, that's just not going to happen. I will say one other thing, if I could. I mentioned earlier that we are looking and we're supporting, and what Houston taught us and other cities taught us is that a distributed system is vital. What that means is that you can't just have one area of town that is the primary place where you take care of an issue, whether that issue is homelessness or drug abuse or mental health or whatever. When the people are actually living or trying to live in different areas of town, you need to be able to bring services to them. And so that's why we've been a cheerleader, if you will, a supporter of this notion that we need not just one shelter, but we need multiple shelters, not just one resource center, but multiple resource centers, not just one addiction services provider or facility, but multiple ones that can meet people where they're at.
Carol or Paul, anything you want to add, or did Greg get it covered?
Could I just jump in with one thought, Bill? I'm a fan of the Downtown Partnerships Ambassador Program. I think it's really made a difference in downtown. And as Greg and Rasmussen Foundation are talking about the Third Avenue, we see an opportunity for a partnership where they expand their area. It's working. They're bringing compassion. They know these individuals' first name and they can de-escalate them and move them along. I think we should invest in the things that are already working and making a difference. So as the Downtown Partnership looks to make a difference in downtown, I think we should be thinking about how do we invest in that.
Another question, and then we'll check and see if we have any questions from our audience, is how can the municipality be a better partner for businesses with this issue, with the issues surrounding homelessness and the many aspects of it? Is there anything that you view as being a way for the municipality to up its game? Tough question.
I'll jump in, Bill. I think one of the things that we discovered is that the municipality has had great ideas and have been focused and wanted to come up with solutions. I think one of the main things that's been missing is any kind of a PR outreach. And what we discovered is that our community is really asking for us as leaders and for the muni to communicate to them what has happened, what is happening, and what we're all going to do. And without that communication, people feel very disenfranchised, sort of out of the loop. And I think that piece, which we've launched, and that's where we discovered some of the statistics that say how important of an issue it is in our community. With that outreach as business leaders and providers, I think that we have a huge opportunity to get the community behind us. And without the community behind us, this is not going to work. And it can't just be a few business leaders and some providers and funders. It has to be something we all invest in. And I think that was the piece that was missing, Bill.
Hey, Bill, can I add real quick? I will say we are at a precipice, right? There was an election yesterday, and I told you all before, and many of you know me, I live out of state. So these are my observations from outside. I feel, at least through this homeless conversation with the Homeless Leadership Council, that the municipality has been engaged. And I'm going to invite whoever is able to win the election to meet with us and meet with the community, because there's no one solution and there are no easy answers to this question. It's going to require a broad coalition of people putting in work, putting in time, putting in effort. There are people who are in need There are people that we can, as I talked about before in the path to independence, they just have a little bit of assistance allows that to go a long way. And others who are going to need more robust sort of interventions. But to engage engage the provider community will be very, very important for the next mayor of Anchorage.
Carol, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on that question, or?
Just a couple of quick thoughts. I think one of the things we learned early on at the HLC was how little funding the municipality had to actually invest in the solution. So I think we're looking forward to the alcohol tax and the municipality actually having some skin in the game and to help this community be more strategic and focused on local solutions. We can't regulate our way to a solution. We need to invest in those solutions. That's both capacity and resources and good listening and having the community informed and their views or input accepted into the process. So I want to say that it's hard. I see the municipality in a different place today than they were 3 years ago when we first started the conversation. They're definitely at the table, and they will now stand with other communities who recognize this as a community problem and one that they need to invest in as well.
So I think what I'm going to do here, folks, I don't see any questions in the Q&A panel, so we're not getting any questions directly from our audience in attendance today. Spencer, did you get any that I'm unaware of?
We have one in the chat that I'd like to put before the panelists. In a moment. Has any thought been given to what brings these individuals to their homeless situation? And are there interventional ideas to help keep people from getting to the point of homelessness? If anyone would like to take that.
Who'd like to go first?
You want me to start it? I think in the beginning, I said, really, for now, we're just kind of putting our fingers on the dike, but we have to get upstream, which is what this question really poses. We have to get upstream. I think when a state stopped funding mental health care, that began to roll the ball in the wrong direction. People that actually needed that solution, there was nothing for them. We lack addiction services. We have to find treatment options, and we need to get people in quickly. The story I think I keep hearing over and over is, I was ready for help, but I can't get into an addiction recovery program for 6 months. Well, 6 months from now, their situation is likely worse because they didn't get the help they needed when they were ready. We have to change that. I think that's part of what the alcohol tax money is trying to fix, why there's so much advocacy going on at the state level for additional resources to fill those gaps that clearly exist. I think there's a lot of thought being given to how do we intervene and how do we stop people from having what should be an overnight stay in a homeless shelter and then an immediate solution that gets them out. That's the idea that Greg will probably talk about for the Day Engagement Center. But right now, we don't have that option as a community. And we need to make sure that we have all of those options. I call it a full menu. We lack pieces of a menu, and those critical pieces that are missing could make a difference if we could just fill those gaps. Greg, I'm sure.
Yeah, upstream is the right word. I mean, the question really, and I think that really was from Mr. Black, that those interventions need to happen much earlier and much often, more often. And for those of us who are now just trying to handle the influx of people who are on the street, who are needing help, and really as we forecast what's going to happen when the funding for the Sullivan goes away, you know, those are upwards of 300 to 400 people on a nightly basis that are now going to be outside. And that's an untenable situation for us. We should not be content with that. I know that doesn't answer your questions about how people got there. And right now, as Carol said, we're putting our finger in the dike and trying to provide the services to help get them out. But mental health services, we've been made aware of, addiction services, whether that's drugs or alcohol, those are key indicators as to whether or not we're going to see a homeless population explode or go down. So our goal really is to help in the present. We're going to assist the providers in getting data so they can do exactly what you're talking about, preventing those situations in the future. I will also, if I could, Mr. Branson mentioned something in the chat as well, and he talked about preying upon each other. And I read that answer as to mean more than just those who are experiencing homelessness, but you go on to talk about competing for a limited amount of resources. And that's absolutely correct. And it's a tough conversation to have. And I guess all three of us who are on the panel today can talk about it because we're not providers. And to a certain degree, we're supporters, we are advocates, and we are funders. But we're not in the position of having to ask for that money on a regular basis and not have it at either the federal, the state, or the local level. Be something that is just bought into as an idea that we have to fund. And so these folks who are doing yeoman's work out there, and I'm talking about providers in particular, need to have our support. And so, we have to find a better way to fund those organizations, in my view. And we have to find a better way to fund the priorities that we need at this point, whether those are shelters, whether those are permanent supportive housing, whether those are targeting youth, whether that's targeting senior, whether that's targeting folks who are at the highest level of acuity and in terms of their needs. It's easy to get disillusioned in terms of those who are doing this work on a day-to-day basis. So I just encourage you, and I thank everybody who's here today to learn, because that's what we're doing. We're learning as we go along, and we're just trying to put some emphasis where it's needed.
Paul, any last thoughts on that?
Oh, I think Greg touched on it. I saw another comment in here. What can we do as individuals? Because I think really that's what it boils down to. And every single one of our providers has a needs list that as individuals we can help. And it may be in a small way, but collectively it becomes big. And that support is really what is needed. And in fact, part of the question was grassroots. And I would respond with saying that's exactly what is needed, is a grassroots effort from every single one of us in the community.
Okay. Well, folks, I have to tell you, we have run out of time. This has been an amazing hour. I deeply appreciate you sharing your time so generously with our audience. I believe that we've learned a lot today from each of you in your different perspectives and in your joint views on these issues. And the work that you are doing is to be applauded. I want to thank you all for going out there and doing the heavy lifting that you are doing together to help to address what is a very significant issue facing our community that does need many, many more like you to join in to help us to address these issues and to help these folks to get back on the path to a healthy and brighter future. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank again our audience for attending today. I want to thank Alaska Executive Search and Bradison Management Group for sponsoring today's event. The AEDC Voice will be on again next month, and Spencer, our guest on June the 9th will be Mr. Rob Gillum, CEO of McKinley Management. And that's going to be a really exciting session to have. So we will invite everyone to please come back and join us then. With that, again, thanks to our panelists. Thank you all. You're all great members of the community and great contributors to the community in so many different ways. And we really appreciate the hard work that you are doing, both as businesses and as supporters of these different issues, and in particular, the issue that was the topic today, homelessness. Katie, anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, we just appreciate everyone's time today, and thanks so much for putting this on, Bill.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's a beautiful day in Anchorage, as it always is. We hope you have a great day and a great week. Be careful out there, be prosperous, wear a mask when you should, and we will see you all at next month's AEDC Voice. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.